Hey friends, it's David again, and today I'm going to talk to you about what I would do differently if I were to reinstall solar, or if I were to go back to when I originally installed the solar system onto my travel trailer here. My wife and I are full-time RVers, so keep in mind that our solar setup is much larger and more robust than the typical weekend RVer would need, because we're living off of this. It supplies the electricity that we used to live off of day in and day out. And I did a few things wrong that I would definitely change. So hopefully if you're going to install solar onto your RV, then you can learn from my mistakes. My first mistake was thinking I could film this video outside. It is winter in Indiana. It's way too cold to film outside, so I'm gonna stay in here where it's nice and warm. But the first mistake I'm gonna talk about with the RV solar installation is the solar panels that I used. I originally used 12 volt nominal solar panels because I thought, this is a 12 volt system, so the voltage I should, be using for that is 12 volt nominal for the panels to match the battery voltage. I mean, technically the voltage output of the panels is closer to 18 volts in full sun, but if I were to redo it, I would use residential solar panels, something that put out 48 volts or more. And the reason I would do this is because the power loss through the wiring is less if the voltage is higher, because watts equals volts times amps. And so if watts is the same, if you've got the same wattage solar array, if the voltage is increased with the solar panels, then the amperage must decrease by the whatever ratio the volts went up by. And so 48 volts will result in less amps flowing through the wire. You could also use smaller wire then, which is going to be cheaper, maybe easier to fit through whatever holes or wherever you're running those wires to reach the solar charge controller. Not only would I use higher voltage solar panels, but I would also put more solar panels. Not necessarily more, but larger ones. Residential solar panels are typically pretty big. The solar panels that we've got up on our roof are only 160 watts each, but you can get residential sized solar panels that are like 400 watts pretty easily, and they tend to be a lot cheaper than the 18 volt solar panels like what we use. You can get like a 400 watt solar panel for only $250, whereas these 160 watters are like $400 or $500 each. And so I would probably go with 3 400 watt 48 volt residential solar panels to get like 1200 watts of solar up on our roof. Right now we only have like just over 600 with 4 solar panels up there. So the solar array I would do completely differently. The second thing I would do is get a smaller inverter. Currently we have a 3000 watt inverter, which for some reason I thought I would need that much, but we don't. We've never used it to output 3000 watts. Probably the most we ever use is when we're running our microwave. It pulls about 110 to 120 amps. So multiplied by 12 volts or 14.4 volts is, still under 1500 watts. So instead I would probably get a 2000 watt inverter. So that would allow us to save a little bit of money on the inverter itself since it's a smaller unit. And then we would also be able to consume less electricity when the inverter is on, because just having the inverter on pulls about 4 amps, and if the inverter is smaller, then you'll have less of that parasitic draw just from having the inverter on. And I would also buy an inverter charger all-in-one unit. It combines the inverter with the converter charger, which converts the 120 AC electricity coming in through your shore power cable down to 12 volt nominal DC to recharge your batteries. And then those inverter chargers also have a steady state transfer switch inside of them as well. Whereas the system that I installed, the inverter, the 3-stage smart converter charger, and the transfer switch are all separate units, so it takes up a lot more space in my storage bay where all of those components are installed at. And my transfer switch is also a physical switch, whereas the transfer switch, it's like a relay. It's like a big relay that like flips down when I think the inverter is turned on, and then it snaps up when the inverter is turned off or you're plugged into shore power cable, or it's the other way around, I forget. But the steady state transfer switch in the newer inverter chargers is I believe it's a digital transfer switch, so it's probably more reliable than a physical relay. But yeah, so I would definitely get a smaller inverter to save cost as well as save amperage draw when it's on, and an inverter charger because it's just better technology. The next thing I would have done differently is I would have installed a bus bar for all of the positive connections that would be made to my battery bank. The way I did it back then, when I just didn't really have as much knowledge as I do now, is all of the wires that needed to be connected to the positive terminal of my battery bank were all just piled up, stacked up on top of that terminal. And that's just not really good practice. What you really want to do is, if you have a lot of connections running to the battery, is install a bus bar with one wire per terminal on that bus bar, and then at the end you put on one wire that leads to the battery terminal. And one of the issues that I actually ran into when I was installing my doing the solar install and the battery bank install is I had so many wires and things running to that positive terminal that the bolt that I had that threaded down into the battery terminal itself didn't engage enough threads to actually be tightened down, and it ripped out some of the threads because it's just brass, or I think some brass or bronze on that battery terminal, and I actually had to buy a longer bolt so that I could engage more of those threads to actually be able to tighten that bolt down onto the terminal. And it was really hard to find that bolt specifically because Relion, which is the brand of batteries we have, uses this really funky thread. It's like an ultra fine thread that you can't just buy at a hardware store, and it was so hard to source this bolt, but finally found one and was able to get it shipped to me, and then I was able to actually engage enough threads to tighten it down. But I never should have done that. That should have been, like a wake-up call to me. Hey, dummy, maybe there's a better way to do this. And yeah, so if you're going to be having a lot of things running to your positive terminal, then or negative terminal for that matter, then just install a bus bar. And then the last thing I would have done differently is I would have gotten a third 200 amp hour lithium battery for 600 amp hours total. When we originally hit the road, when I originally built this system, we only put in 400 amp hours, which I thought was going to be enough. And it has been enough, but we really could have used 600 amp hours this whole time. But they're just so dang expensive, and when we first hit the road, we were on a pretty tight budget, and so I just didn't want to spend another $2,000 on 200 more amp hours of battery, which I thought was just going to be that third battery was just going to kind of be a luxury battery just to have a little more battery storage. We've gotten by with 400, we've been fine, but having that extra 200 just would have been really nice and would have alleviated some stresses with energy on, when we get all those cloudy days in a row, like multiple days in a row, we'd be able to get through those a little better with 600 amp hours. So that has been all of the things that I would have done differently with our solar setup when I first installed it, the changes that I would love to make, and honestly, I'm actually going to be doing a couple of those things. I have plans to install a positive terminal bus bar because Ro and I want to add some things. We want to add some DC chargers next to our, on either side of our bed here so that we can just plug in a USB cable into that. Charge our phones overnight so that we don't have to leave the inverter on for that to charge our phones. But like I said, the positive terminal of our batteries have way too many things piled up on that terminal, and so there's no room for anything else to go there for the moment. And we also want to attempt maybe sometime in the future having DC charging for our laptops. So for all those extra things, I'm gonna need a bus bar so that I have more open terminals to provide power to. And I would also love to redo our solar array up on the roof. I have plans to do that as well. We would really like to have 1200 watts of solar. We only have, like I said earlier, just over 600 watts up on the roof. And so, picking up some residential panels would be really nice instead of having the, 18 volt ones that we've got up there right now. So those are two things that I definitely want to do in the future. Probably make some videos on that as well. But the inverter, I'm just going to deal with because the inverter we have right now, it works. It's not an inverter charger and it is oversized, but man, inverter chargers are expensive and I don't want to spend like $900 to $1,000 on a new inverter just because. And also, it's probably likely that I'm not going to get another 200 amp hour battery. I've been talking about that for years, but they're just really expensive and what we have now works. It gets the job done. It's not ideal, but I'm the type of person to where if what I have gets the job done and I could upgrade it, but it's really expensive, I'm probably just going to deal with it. But yeah, that is the changes that I would have made if I knew what I know now when I installed this onto my RV. I would have done all of those things instead of what I did at the time. And if you're about to install solar onto your RV, I hope this video is helpful and you can avoid some of the mistakes I made. But that's all for this video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Sweet Pea, you want to say bye? Boo! You want to say bye? Well, look at you in your cute sweater. Boo! There we go. Good girl. She actually just got some cysts removed and she's wearing this sweater because, well, not only is it cold in Indiana and it keeps her warm, but it's to keep her from scratching at the sutures. And it's been doing a really good job because we catch her scratching at the side, her side here where those sutures are. And so she's got to keep wearing this sweater until those sutures get removed in a week. Yeah, a week from Thursday. Yeah, but that's all. See you guys. Bye.